Have you ever felt someone steering your emotions with a smile that wasn't real, guiding your choices without ever raising their voice? Manipulation rarely looks like a threat. It feels like doubt, pressure, or a quiet pull you can't explain. The Stoics saw this long before we did and learned how calm becomes a shield. Stay with me and let's look at their tactics through a clearer lens. As we step into the first chapter, picture this. You're standing in a quiet room, yet something feels off, as if a hand you cannot see is gently nudging your thoughts in a direction you never chose. That subtle unease is the first sign that someone has found a way to influence you without ever raising their voice. Manipulators work in whispers, not in storms, and the Stoics understood this long before we ever named it. Now imagine this. You're speaking with someone who smiles at the right moments, asks the right questions, and never says anything outright harmful. Yet every time the conversation ends, you feel lighter in the wrong places and heavier in the ones that matter. It's like they know which thread to pull, or which doubt to stir. This is how manipulation begins, not as an attack, but as a soft pressure that makes you second-guess your own compass. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. What he didn't need to add was this truth. Manipulators try to color your thoughts before you even notice the brush in their hand. I once knew someone who operated exactly like this. Let's call him Daniel. He never commanded anything, never threatened. He simply used praise as a leash. Every time I made a decision, he would admire the parts that aligned with his interests and remain silent on the rest. It sounds harmless, but silence too can be a blade. One day I realized I was no longer thinking for myself. I was thinking for his approval. That is the invisible hand of manipulation. It doesn't push, it guides. And the moment you follow it without questioning, you've already lost the first battle. Here's where Stoic clarity becomes your armor. A Stoic doesn't rush. A Stoic watches. And watching is the first way you outsmart someone who relies on confusion. Seneca reminded us that no wind is favorable to the sailor who doesn't know where he's going. Manipulators depend on you not noticing the shift in direction. They depend on speed, pressure, and doubt. You break their entire strategy simply by slowing your breath and asking yourself a single, honest question. Is this choice truly mine, or does it feel borrowed? From here, see the manipulator for what they are: not an enemy, but a signal that your awareness must sharpen. Every tactic they use is built on one truth. They cannot control what you clearly see. Their compliments often appear at moments when you hesitate. Their advice comes precisely when your footing feels weak. Their concern shows up when you're vulnerable, not because they care, but because influence is easiest when you're searching for guidance. Epictetus taught that if you want to be free, learn to distinguish between what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Manipulators blur that line until your desires begin to resemble their intentions. Let me share another scene. A friend of mine, Elias, had a colleague who always played the role of the gentle mentor. He praised Elias for being humble, compliant, and easy to work with. Sounds flattering, doesn't it? But every time Elias tried to assert his ideas, the colleague would go quiet, raising an eyebrow as if disappointment were a superior form of punishment. Over months, Elias learned to speak less and agree more. That's how subtly it happens. Not through force, through shaping the emotional climate you live in. Until one day, Elias heard a single sentence from an old Stoic text. You are not compelled by anything except your own judgment, and it snapped him awake. He realized he had traded his judgment for someone else's approval. that awakening ended the manipulator's influence instantly. Awareness is the cut that severs their strings. Advancing to the core insight of this chapter, understand this simple fact. Manipulators rely on invisibility. If you expose the pattern, even silently inside yourself, you remove the only power they ever had. They operate in shadows because shadows hide intention. The moment you shine presence on them, not anger, not confrontation, but presence, they step back. They cannot guide a mind that is fully awake. They cannot distort perception when your attention becomes deliberate. And they cannot plant doubt in soil that has already been examined. A Stoic doesn't fear manipulation. A Stoic outsees it, outsmarts it, outstands it, not through aggression, but through clarity. You don't need to attack them. You simply need to stop walking the path they quietly paved for you. This is where calm becomes your weapon and awareness becomes your shield. And as we move into the next chapter, you'll see why the quiet pause, the one most people overlook, is the move that breaks a manipulator's entire game. Moving into the second chapter, imagine a moment so quiet it almost feels fragile, the kind of stillness that appears right before someone tries to push you into a corner with their urgency, their pressure, their hidden agenda. You feel that slight tightening in your chest, that instinctive pull to respond quickly just to relieve the tension. This is the exact moment manipulators wait for. They know speed is their ally. They know haste is the doorway into your decisions. But this is also where your greatest Stoic weapon rises. The pause, small, silent, but decisive. Picture yourself being confronted with a demand dressed as a suggestion. Someone tells you that you need to decide now, answer now, agree now. Their tone is soft, but their pacing is sharp. They push your mind into a narrow hallway where you feel you only have two options, comply or conflict. And yet, there is a third option, the Stoic option, the pause, one breath that resets the entire game. Seneca once wrote that anger, impulse, and fear lose power the moment you delay their entrance. The same is true with manipulation. When you slow down, their plan stumbles. Now imagine being in a room with someone who expects you to react instantly. Every time you hesitate, you can see a flicker in their eyes, a subtle annoyance, as if your calm is a problem they did not anticipate. It is. Because manipulators design situations where your instinct is to restore harmony quickly. They poke your sense of urgency because urgency clouds judgment. But a Stoic knows that nothing truly important collapses within a single breath. That single breath is what saves you. Let me share a story. A friend of mine, Rowan, once worked with a supervisor who excelled at manufactured pressure. Anytime Rowan proposed an idea, the supervisor would respond with feigned concern. "I need your answer right now. We don't have time." Rowan would rush, stumble, and ultimately make concessions he didn't agree with. One day, after reading a passage from Epictetus that said, "No man is free who is not master of himself," Rowan tried something different. The next time the supervisor pushed him, Rowan paused, looked down, took a breath, lifted his head and said calmly, "I'll answer you after I think about it." Silence filled the room. Real silence. And in that silence, the manipulator's power cracked. Because the pause did not fit their design. They couldn't exploit clarity. They could only exploit haste. From that day on, the supervisor never used urgency as a weapon again. Here's where the pause becomes more than a tactic. It becomes a declaration. You show them that you do not run on their clock. You do not move at their command. You do not allow someone else's tempo to override your judgment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the mind must stand firm, even when the world demands motion. The one who pauses first chooses the ground on which the rest of the conversation stands. A manipulator hates this because they cannot twist a slow, deliberate mind. They cannot infiltrate a calm breath. They cannot reshape a decision made without fear. From here, understand that the pause is not passive. It is active restraint. It communicates strength without a single word. It unsettles someone who expected you to rush into a trap. And most importantly, it gives you room to see. Because once you slow down, their tactics become visible. That urgency that once felt natural now looks staged. That pressure that once felt justified now looks calculated. Their strategy unravels because you're no longer moving blind. I once watched a colleague confront someone who had been subtly undermining her for months. Instead of fighting back, she used the pause after every pointed remark. Not defensive, not emotional, just still. And you could see the shift in the room. Every pause made the manipulator fill the silence with more words, revealing more than they intended. The pause became a mirror, and they exposed themselves in it. This is the quiet strength the Stoics revered. Not the strength that shouts, the strength that waits, the strength that sees, the strength that chooses its moment rather than being dragged into someone else's. The pause is control embodied. And when you hold control like that, manipulators lose every advantage they thought they had. At this stage, you begin to see that calm is not a mood, it is a strategy. And as we step into the next chapter, you'll understand why emotional control is the one door manipulators can never enter unless you open it yourself. As we step into the third chapter, feel the shift as if the air around you grows heavier, not from danger, but from the weight of emotions someone hopes you cannot hold. This is where manipulators strike most quietly, not at your logic, at your feelings. They don't need to change your mind if they can tilt your heart. And this is the battlefield most people never notice until they're already losing ground. Now imagine standing in front of someone who knows exactly which emotion to provoke in you. Maybe they poke your pride. Maybe they stir your guilt. Maybe they lean on your fear of disappointing others. You feel the heat rising inside you, that instinctive rush that tells you to react, to defend, to justify, to prove. But beneath that rush lies the very trap the Stoics warned us about. Epictetus said that if someone can make you angry, they have become your master. Not because they are powerful, but because you handed them the reins of your emotions. That line hits like a hammer because you know it's true. When someone provokes you and you snap, you're no longer steering your own mind. They are. Here's where the story deepens. A colleague of mine, let's call her Mara, was brilliant, calm, thoughtful, but she had one weakness. Whenever someone questioned her competence, even subtly, her emotions lit up like dry leaves touched by a spark. It wasn't rage, it was panic. She'd over-explain, over-defend, overcompensate. She didn't realize this emotional swirl wasn't coming from truth. It was coming from an old wound someone kept picking at. One day, after rereading Marcus Aurelius, who wrote, "The mind maintains its own calm by withdrawing into itself," she tried something new. The next time someone challenged her in a meeting with a tone designed to embarrass her, she didn't defend herself. She didn't rush. She didn't prove. She simply looked at them with a kind of quiet steadiness and said, "I understand your concern. Here's what matters. No tremor, no panic, no fire." In that moment, the manipulator lost all traction because she didn't give them access to her emotions. She sealed the door. This is where emotional control is not softness. It is strategy. It is strength. It is ownership of your inner world. Manipulators thrive on emotional openings like cracks in a wall. If they can slip fear into the gap, they can direct you. If they can slip guilt in, they can steer you. If they can slip anger in, they can make you react in ways that later make you question yourself. But when you train yourself to feel the emotion rise and choose not to ride it, the manipulator's tool turns dull in their hands. Here's where many people misunderstand the Stoics. Emotional control isn't suppression. Suppression is a prison. Control is a vantage point. It's stepping back and seeing the emotion before it sees you. You acknowledge it. You breathe through it. You choose your response rather than being dragged by your reaction. Seneca wrote that no emotion is dangerous if you meet it early, and when you meet it with awareness, manipulators cannot shape it into a weapon. I once watched someone try to push another man into anger to win an argument. The insults grew sharper, the jabs more personal, but the man stayed composed, not cold, composed. And the more composed he stayed, the more frantic the manipulator became. It was almost painful to watch. You could see the attacker losing control, swinging wildly at a stillness he couldn't shake. And that is when the truth revealed itself. Emotional control isn't just protection. It is a mirror. It shows the manipulator their own instability. It exposes their intentions. And in that exposure, their influence dissolves. From here, understand this deeply. Emotional control is not about winning a moment. It's about owning your life. The world will always have people who press your buttons just to see what happens, but the Stoic refuses to hand over the panel. You are allowed to feel everything. You are not required to act on all of it. The moment you choose response over reaction, you step outside their reach. At this stage, the path becomes clearer. Once you master the emotional battleground, manipulators lose their favorite weapon. And as we move into the next chapter, you'll see how setting boundaries without explanations becomes the next step in turning their influence into dust. Advancing to the fourth chapter, feel the shift as if the room around you suddenly grows sharper, like someone just stepped a little too close into your space. Not physically, but in a way that makes your instincts tighten. This is the moment when manipulators reach for their next weapon. Not confusion, not emotion, but intrusion. They want access to your decisions, your time, your energy. And they do it by pushing you into explanations you never owed. This is where boundaries become more than lines. They become armor. And the Stoics treated them like sacred ground. Picture this. You tell someone, "I can't make it today," and instead of accepting your words, they tilt their head, waiting for the justification, the excuse, the apology. Waiting for you to open the door so they can walk inside your choices. Manipulators fish for reasons because reasons are handles. If you offer one, they pull. And if they can pull, they can steer. But a Stoic learns early that explanations are not currency. They are chains. You don't owe someone a story in order to guard your peace. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is simply, "I won't." Clear. Steady, complete. Let me bring you into a scene I watched unfold years ago. A man named Adrian, calm by nature, used to get cornered by a co-worker who always demanded more time, more help, more emotional space than anyone else. And every time Adrian tried to decline, he would fall into the spiral of explaining. "I'm tired. I already have plans. I don't think I can meet that deadline." But the more he justified, the more the co-worker pushed back. "You know the tone. It won't take long. You can squeeze it in. Why can't you just help?" One day, After reading a passage from Epictetus reminding him that what is necessary requires no defense, Adrian tried something different. When the co-worker cornered him again, he said quietly, "No, that won't work for me." And then he stayed silent. No story, no reason, no emotional opening. The co-worker stared at him like someone discovering a locked door for the first time, because that's exactly what a boundary is, a locked door, and you hold the key. Here's where Stoic truth reveals itself. A boundary without explanation is not rudeness, it is self-respect. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that the opinions of others carry no weight unless he picks them up. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop picking up the burdens others place at your feet. You stop letting someone's disappointment become your leash. You stop letting someone's urgency override your priorities. A boundary is the quiet reminder that you are not a resource to be extracted. You are a person whose time and attention must be earned, not taken. From here, notice how manipulators react when you no longer explain. They tense, they insist, they probe, because you just removed their favorite tool: explanations. They can't twist what you didn't offer. They can't guilt-trip what you didn't reveal. They can't reshape a decision that stands like a steady pillar instead of a softened, apologetic sentence. And here's the deeper truth. When someone gets angry because you chose yourself, that anger reveals what they truly valued. Not you, your compliance. Boundaries expose intentions faster than any argument ever could. Let me give you another moment to picture. A friend of mine, Leora, had a relative who constantly pushed into her life with demands disguised as concern. Every time she tried to step back, the relative would say, "But why? What's wrong? Explain it to me." And for years, she did, until she realized that each explanation became a rope around her. So one day, she said a simple line she'd been rehearsing: "I hear you. But my answer stays the same. No detail, no justification, no surrender." The relative tried to poke and prod, but nothing moved. And that was the day Leora understood something vital. You don't lose people when you set boundaries. You lose the people who only came for the parts of you they could use. At this stage, the power of a firm, calm boundary becomes unmistakable. You stop chasing approval. You stop defending your choices. You stop handing manipulators the map to your weak spots. A Stoic boundary is clean, quiet, unshakable. And as we move into the next chapter, you'll see what happens when you take this one step further and learn to observe manipulators not as threats, but as information revealing exactly who they are. Entering the 5th chapter, feel the air settle into a deeper stillness, the kind that arrives when you finally stop defending yourself and begin watching the other person with a clearer, colder kind of understanding. This is where the story shifts. This is where manipulators stop being threats and start becoming information. Because once you stop reacting, every move they make tells you exactly who they are. And that revelation is far more powerful than any confrontation you could launch. Now, imagine sitting across from someone whose smile feels tight around the edges, someone who speaks kindly but whose words carry a soft pressure beneath them. You no longer feel the urge to explain yourself or calm the tension. Instead, you simply observe. And in that observation, their behavior becomes obvious, almost clumsy. You notice the way they phrase things to make you responsible for their feelings. You see the small exaggerations, the strategic pauses, the selective memory. What once felt like confusion now looks like a pattern, because you're no longer inside the storm, you're above it, and from above the shape becomes clear. Here's where Stoic wisdom draws its sharpest line. Marcus Aurelius wrote that when you encounter someone who behaves unjustly, you should not be surprised but reminded of human nature, not as an excuse for them, but as clarity for yourself. People reveal themselves in the smallest gestures. Their character leaks through tone, timing, and intent. And when you stop reacting emotionally, you start reading them like an open scroll. This is the sight manipulators fear most. Not anger, not resistance. Sight. Let me share a moment I witnessed that changed the way I understand this. There was a man named Errol, calm by temperament, who often dealt with a co-worker skilled in guilt and subtle blame. Every time something went wrong, she would lace her words with tiny needles meant to steer the responsibility toward him. For months, he defended himself, tried to stay polite, tried to meet her halfway, until one day he stopped responding with explanations. He listened without defending, and the more space he left, the more she exposed what she had worked so hard to hide, until she revealed far more than she intended. In 5 minutes of over-justifying herself, she exposed her intentions, her manipulations, her insecurities, and every pattern she had spent months hiding. Errol didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His stillness turned into truth serum. This is the power of observation, unclouded by emotion. When you stop feeding the dynamic, the manipulator becomes frantic. Their tactics grow louder because your calm is a wall they cannot climb. They try guilt. You don't move. They try urgency. You stay steady. They try flattery. You see the shine and not the hook. And eventually they reveal the part they always hide, their motive. You cannot hide the truth from someone who isn't reacting to the illusion. From here, understand a deeper truth. Manipulators study reactive people. They thrive on those who answer quickly, defend quickly, attach quickly, and assume good intentions too easily. But they cannot study someone who observes instead of reacts. They cannot predict someone who listens more than they speak. And they cannot control someone who sees them clearly. Clarity is the end of their influence, not conflict. Clarity. I once told a friend this, a friend who always felt drained after certain conversations. I said, stop explaining, stop defending, just watch. And in 1 week, everything became obvious to him. The friend who needed advice didn't need advice. He needed a puppet. The co-worker who respected his opinion didn't respect his opinion. She needed someone to blame, and the relative who wanted the best for him only wanted the version of him that served their comfort. When he stopped reacting, all their intentions showed themselves like ink rising through paper. This is where Stoic philosophy shines in its simplicity. Epictetus said that appearances are misleading, but truth becomes visible when you create space to see it. That space is emotional steadiness. That space is silence. That space is the refusal to be drawn into someone else's rhythm. A manipulator cannot operate in open daylight, but the moment you stop dancing to their music, the sun rises and their shadows disappear. At this stage, you hold a new kind of power, not to change someone else, but to finally see them without distortion. And as we move into the next chapter, you'll understand how stillness doesn't just reveal them. It exposes their intentions until they unravel under their own weight without you ever lifting a finger. Entering the 6th chapter, feel the tension in the air shift again, as if the ground beneath the manipulator finally begins to tremble while you remain steady, rooted, unshaken. This is where your silence becomes more than calm. It becomes pressure, not aggressive, not loud, but the kind of pressure that exposes everything they tried to hide. Because manipulators do not fear confrontation. They fear a mirror. And stillness is the clearest mirror you can hold up to anyone. Now imagine this. Someone throws a baited comment your way. Sharp, designed to trigger you, designed to drag you back into their rhythm. You feel the familiar pull inside your chest, that instinct to react, to defend, to clarify. But instead, you do nothing. You let the words fall to the ground between you. And in that moment, they feel the weight of their own attempt. Not because you punished them, but because you didn't feed them. A manipulator needs your reaction like fire needs oxygen, and you just removed the air. Here's where the wisdom of the Stoics cuts through the noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person is disturbed not by things, but by their judgment of things. When you remove that judgment, when you refuse to take someone's behavior personally, you become untouchable. You stand like a stone pillar in a storm while they stumble in the winds they created. They try again. You remain still. They amplify. You stay unmoved. And little by little their tactics collapse under their own weight. A manipulator cannot function when their target does not dance. Let me bring you into a quiet moment I once witnessed between two colleagues. One of them, Dalen, was skilled in subtle jabs, never loud, never direct, but always crafted to provoke. The other, Mira, had recently embraced the Stoic practice of deliberate calm. One day, in front of others, Dalen made a comment meant to embarrass her. Not harsh, but enough to spark defensiveness. Mira didn't laugh, didn't snap, didn't try to explain. She simply looked at him, blinked once, and said nothing. The silence stretched just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable, including him. And then something fascinating happened. Dalen started clarifying his own joke, then over-explaining it, then apologizing for it. In less than a minute, he unraveled himself. Not because she fought him, but because she didn't react at all. This is where the game flips. Your steadiness forces them to stand in the open, without the cover of your reactions. When you don't take the bait, they are left alone with their intentions, exposed for all to see. Every tactic they attempt becomes more visible, less defensible, more desperate. And that desperation is the beginning of their undoing. From here, understand the deeper truth. You do not defeat manipulators by out-talking them. You defeat them by letting them reveal themselves. The Stoics believed that nothing reveals character faster than pressure. But it doesn't have to be your pressure. It can be the pressure of their own frustration when their tricks stop working, when their hooks no longer land, when their control meets a wall made of stillness. Silence, used wisely, is not avoidance. It is strategy. It is clarity. It is power. I once told someone that the most threatening thing you can say to a manipulator is nothing at all, and I stand by that. Because silence denies them the fuel they depend on. It forces them to face the truth of their own tactics, and it protects your peace without costing you a drop of energy. At this stage, you begin to understand something crucial. Stillness is not passive. It is active strength. And as we move into the next chapter, you'll see how mastering this strength leads to the final step, not resisting manipulators, but removing yourself from their reach entirely. At this stage, the path narrows into a quiet clearing, the kind where the noise behind you finally stops mattering. This is the moment the Stoics considered the highest form of strategy, not winning, not resisting, but walking away with your peace intact. Because some people don't want resolution, they want access. And once you stop giving it, their power ends. Now imagine standing in front of someone who has pulled the same strings for months, maybe years. The same guilt, the same pressure, the same attempts to twist your choices into their benefit. You feel the old pattern trying to pull you in again, but this time, something in you has changed. You stop explaining, you stop absorbing, you stop dancing to a song that was never yours. You simply feel done, not angry, not spiteful, just done. And that feeling is freedom. Here's where Stoic clarity sharpens. Seneca wrote that the wise man releases what weighs down the soul. Distance is not coldness. It is respect for your own life. When you walk away from a manipulator, you're not abandoning them, you're reclaiming yourself. You're saying, without drama or bitterness, my peace is not up for negotiation, and nothing threatens a manipulator more than someone who no longer needs their approval. Let me give you a simple story. A friend of mine, Corinne, spent years dealing with a person who wrapped control inside kindness. Whenever he tried to step back, they tightened the emotional rope. He tried calm, he tried boundaries, he tried silence, and still the cycle persisted. One night, after reading Epictetus remind us that freedom begins in the mind, he realized the truth. He wasn't trapped by them. He was trapped by habit. So he stepped away, quietly, firmly. No final argument, no explanation. And the relief that followed wasn't triumph. It was release. From here, understand the heart of this final move. Walking away is not weakness. It is mastery. You stop fighting battles that drain you. You stop letting someone else write the script of your reactions. You stop being available to the patterns that once controlled you. Distance breaks the cycle more cleanly than confrontation ever could. And when you finally choose that distance, you reclaim space for your own clarity, your own voice, your own direction. The silence that follows isn't empty. It's yours again. This is the final truth the Stoics lived by. The person who owns themselves cannot be owned by anyone else. When you understand how manipulation works, something inside you shifts. You no longer move with their pressure. You no longer bend under their tone. You begin to trust your own judgment again, and that trust feels like breathing for the first time after being held underwater. Calm is not weakness. Calm is mastery. It is the quiet strength that keeps you steady when someone else is trying to shape your world without your permission. If this message helped you see yourself with a little more clarity and stand a little taller in your own space, take a moment to settle into that feeling. You earned it. And if you want to keep building this inner steadiness, consider subscribing so you never walk this path alone. Every lesson here is another step toward a mind you can rely on, no matter who tries to pull you off balance. Before you go, share a small comment below. Just 2 or 3 simple words. You can write, "Stay calm." It is a quiet way to anchor the lesson into your mind. It also lets me know you are someone who chooses clarity over pressure and self-respect over control. Remember this. You are allowed to protect your peace without explaining. You are allowed to walk away without guilt. You are allowed to choose the life that feels true to you, not the one shaped by someone else's expectations. And in the next video, we will go even deeper into how to stay centered when people push your limits. Stay steady. Your calm is not just a shield, it is a power that grows with you.